So just to be careful about time, so we will start. So first of all, thank you everyone for your attendance today to the session. As I said, big pressure today, and also thank you to the Spring.io team for the invitation to this community event. Really big honor. So first of all, I will start by introducing myself. So my name is Badr Nass Lahsen. I work as lead cloud security architect in CyberArk. I cover the pre-sales within the EMEA team. And before that, I have been working in different industries, mainly in the banking industry, also some public sectors. I used a lot Spring for more than 17 years. And this project started from, I would say, real banking example, which is PSD2 for people who knows payments industry. In Europe, there was regulation, and we had to expose our APIs in OpenAPI 3 format. And from then, it became more open source. We opened it, and thanks to the contributions of the community, the project is still, I would say, is still alive for now more than 5 years. So today we'll deep dive into a few features related to OpenAPI 3.1. So there has been few changes in the specification. So we also integrated these changes in the library, and how we can also benefit from the power of Spring Boot 3. So springdoc-openapi is also compatible with Spring Boot 2, which is nowadays, I would say, end of life and with extended support. But we needed also to support the new features that came from Spring Boot 3. So today, our agenda will cover the following topics. First one will be an introduction about OpenAPI specification. I have seen in the poll that there have been some questions about the approaches, API first or code first. So I have seen that there is some interesting discussions around this topic. Also, I will share what are the new enhancements in OpenAPI 3.1, and also in Spring Boot 3, because how we can also benefit from the power of Spring Boot 3 in OpenAPI. After that, I will deep dive a little bit. So for the session, it's we have about 50 minutes. So I will try to go to the most important features, but the idea is to give you just an overview of what is possible with SpringDoc. And of course, the session will be with few demos, okay? Some demos of codes, how we can integrate, and how we can enable the support. So first, I start by this slide. I believe many of you have already seen this schema that is related to different approaches of design. So when we design an API, it can be contract first or design first, which is the first option that we have here. You have a specification. In general, it happens a lot in the compliance, in the regulatory domains. You have a specification, and everyone needs to respect it. Okay. For example, in air travels, in banking, it's very regulated. Everyone has to respect it. And then we start coding or implementing these changes. On the other hand, in some other organizations, we can start implementing our APIs in a continuous improvement process. And on the other hand, we want to provide the contract documentation for the other teams to integrate. These approaches are complementary, okay? And we will see that springdoc-openapi can be used in the first approach or in the first option to validate regarding the contract that we have respected this contract. And for the second option, it can be used directly to expose the contract. Okay? So in the world of APIs, there was Swagger. I don't know if a lot of you has already used OpenAPI. In the audience, who is using springdoc-openapi? Okay. Okay, nice. Good to know. So I didn't expect too much people, but it's nice, good to know. So for Swagger itself, so it started 2010, but there has been some evolution of the specification. Nowadays, we don't say Swagger, we say OpenAPI documentation. We'll discuss a little bit about the history just after. So here, just a reminder for people about why we need to document APIs. First, as I said, we need to integrate with different systems. We need to understand the behaviors of our APIs. We want to onboard new applications. We want to learn about an API. What is it? What are the features of this new API? We want to prevent errors. So with the OpenAPI spec, you reduce the risk of integration, which is also one of the pains when you are doing project management. You have interoperability between different systems. And when there is any change, when you want to look for the change, you will not look for the change in the code, but in the documentation. Also, when we want to troubleshoot errors, the approach of documentation is easier because we have the different blocks that describes also the error side, if I'm having client errors or server errors. It's efficient for development. When you describe your API in an open way, you can develop in any language. And this is also one of the, I would say, of the strengths of OpenAPI. You can promote also adoption within an organization, the adoption of the mindset of API design, of API first approach. And as I said, since the beginning, there are also standards and compliance constraints that requires this documentation. Here I have described also just, I would say, an example of life cycle of an API. So in general, you go from a design phase, you develop your API. Security should be by design, okay? But we need to make sure that before publishing, that we have enabled the right level of security in our APIs. You need also to publish and scale the API. And when you are in a run mode or in an operation mode, then you are in a way where you will monitor, analyze, optimize, and try to monetize your APIs. Now let's deep dive into the OpenAPI specification. And for this, we need to know that an OpenAPI spec is, first of all, machine readable, so it's accessible or can be interpreted by different machines, but also by humans. The objective is to have this duality. It's really important to have an HTML format or a human readable format. It can be also different types, and a technical or a machine readable. By default, it's JSON or YAML, but the objective is to have this duality of way of exposing the specification. What is important also is that all the specs need to include some blocks. So with the OpenAPI 3.1, you need to have the paths, the components, and when necessary, you will have also to add the webhooks. So now let's see some history. So OpenAPI, as I said, Swagger started 2010. We talked about OpenAPI 2 in 2014. Today, we are in OpenAPI 3.1. So OpenAPI 3.1 has been released in July 2021. And since then, it's still the current version that is used. So in springdoc-openapi, we started releasing with OpenAPI 3.0. The project started here around the beginning of 2019. Okay. The main changes that you have in OpenAPI 3.1. People that are used to use OpenAPI 3.0, they must know that if you have a GET method and you want to send a request body, it's prohibited or it's not allowed by the specification. Okay. The OpenAPI 3.1 is more permissive, so it allows more flexibility for the request body, and it has been also pushed by the community. So OpenAPI is a specification where you have the main, I would say, editors of the market, but it's also pushed by the community. So that's why they have asked for more flexibility. The second main enhancement is the support of encoding types when you are manipulating multi-part form data. So encoding types in the object level, it existed in OpenAPI 3. But this is a kind of, you can consider it as a bug fix or an enhancement to support also this type of multi-part form data. Path item parameters. Path item parameters in OpenAPI 3.1 are now mandatory. Before, for example, if you define a path parameter, it has been accepted, or I would say it was just recommended to define the definition of your path item parameter. But now, if you have a path item, you need also to define the type in your specification. In terms of types, there has been huge simplification because we moved to the JSON schema format. And here, as you can see, we have less types to manage in the OpenAPI specification. So also from developer point of view, it's easier, it's more, I would say, developer friendly. And the last main enhancement is related to the responses. So the responses with OpenAPI 3.1 are optional. Okay. Sometimes same when you are in an approach design first or API first, you might not be sure about the responses. And they have defined them also as optional. So you don't have to define dummy responses when you are designing your APIs. Now some parallel with Spring. So in Spring framework, now we are still in Spring 6.1, right? So we are having Spring 6.2 that will come in next November, I would say hopefully. But for now we are still in 6.1. That is the base or the foundation of Spring Boot 3. Okay? So we are using Spring Boot 3.3. Now we are in Spring Boot 3.3. And we have some features. So these features, I would say, came with Spring Boot 3. Some of them, they came with the intermediate releases. So the main changes that we have in Spring Boot 3 is the support of Java 17 and now 21, okay, which is the latest long-term support release, I want to say. There is also the support of Jakarta EE namespaces. So this for springdoc-openapi, it was also something to manage during the migration from Spring Boot 2 for project from Spring Boot 2 to Spring Boot 3. So it was one of the changes that has been to be made in the support. Also, there is an important enhancement that can interest us today. It's the RFC 7807 that describes problem details. So in Spring Framework, now we are more careful about the, I would say, the structure of responses. I believe everyone in their project has already defined their own generic structures. And here what we try in Spring Boot 3 to use a normalized response that is provided by the framework. Also, there has been other enhancements related to observability, to GraalVM optimizations and support, thanks also to the AOT ahead of time compilation. And there is more other features. So I believe in the other talks you will see more details about virtual threads, class data sharing, and in the, I would say last year, there was also main enhancement related also to Docker and Docker Compose support, mainly in the testing phases. Now, if we want to bring OpenAPI and Spring together. So the initiative started since 2019. Today, as we are discussing, so these statistics, they come from Maven Central. So these are the public statistics, okay? So people that are downloading the libraries from Maven Central. So today we are having 27 million downloads per month. So this is the last extract. And the project is having 3,100 stars in GitHub. And of course, I count on you also for support and contributing in the project. There are a lot of companies that are heavily using SpringDoc and also contribute. So I will start with some open source interesting projects. For example, some of you might know Apache Camel. Okay, you have CAS, Central Authentication Service or Server. So you have also Spring Cloud in some components. They use springdoc-openapi. You have some big banks like American Express, Société Générale, that are using SpringDoc. Oracle, so Broadcom now, or Spring. But Broadcom for their, I would say for some of their products, not only Spring. Red Hat, and you have our sponsor. So also springdoc-openapi is sponsored by some companies. It helps the project also to live. It's really important also another topic which is related to open source and how you can maintain projects. So this, so we have Mercedes, DMTech, and Contrast Security that are also supporting the project, and also their teams are involved in the maintenance process. You have GHipster. Maybe some people have already used GHipster, which is an application scaffolder, which generates applications front end and back end. But it's a very known project in the open source community, and it's based, or it uses also springdoc-openapi. So this is just to share some references that we have in the project. Now I will deep dive into some features of the library, and what is important to know is that with SpringDoc 2, there has been massive simplifications. The objective is to make the OpenAPI generation the maximum transparent for the developer. Okay. The less overhead in terms of configuration. This is the mindset. Of course, it needs to provide maximum flexibility, but basically, any project, if I'm in the servlet mode, I should just use this dependency, which is springdoc-openapi starter web MVC UI. If I'm in the reactive mode, it's the springdoc-openapi starter webflux UI. So this will provide the access to the Swagger UI in order to, for example, to try the APIs or to make, I would say, any API calls. So the library itself, how it is structured, it's based on Spring Boot Autoconfigure and Spring Core Jakarta. And this module that is common, it's really common to the different implementations. This module, it hides, so this is based also on the return on experience of the previous version. It hides all the complexity that might be related, for example, to load-in configuration that is related to Javadoc. I'm in a context where I'm using Spring Data REST. So this module is able to determine the context, or I'm using Spring Security, for example. It will detect the context of the application and then load the correct SpringDoc configuration. I will deep dive in this to this part just after, but it's important to know that there is a lot of common implementation between the MVC and the webflux, I would say, libraries. If you want only to expose the REST or the OpenAPI documentation without the Swagger UI, you can just ship the springdoc-openapi starter, for example, WebMVC UI or WebFlux UI. It's enough if you want only to expose the REST endpoints. Okay. Of course, there is configuration properties. If you want to disable, I can show it in the demos. So here, what I will try to share is few examples. If I'm in the WebMVC context, if I'm in the WebFlux context, and also all the demos that I will share today, they are available in the public repository, okay, of SpringDoc. So here I will share the IDE. So I will start with a first example that is related to WebMVC. So here I will start with the dependencies. I'm having normal, I would say, Spring WebMVC application the main change, so I want to open API, so I have added this dependency. Okay. Basically, it's the only thing that needs to be done. If I want basic open API, but I want more. So let me go to the application YAML. So as I said in the documentation, you have many properties. Okay, you have many properties. I don't know if I'm having connectivity or I'm having to talk here. So it's important to know that in documentation you have many properties that are related to the UI first, to different parameters in the UI, and properties that are related more to the core or to the API side of SpringDoc. So there is around 100 properties that are already there to make it maximum customized. So if I want to expose in OpenAPI 3, by default, for now, it's still OpenAPI 3.0. Okay. When there will be a huge, I would say, demand to switch, then we can. It's just a parameter to change or to switch to default implementation. So by default, it's OpenAPI 3.0. If you want to expose in OpenAPI 3.1, so you need to define this property. Okay, springdoc API docs dot version. Here is an example of some parameters that you can define in the UI level, just to illustrate that, for example, you can display the request, the REST API call duration. You can sort the different parameters. You can sort them by method. Also here, I want to disable the default pet store URL. Sometimes when you deploy Swagger UI by default, there is a validation to look for the for a public URL. Use root path. So by default, when I will deploy my service under /, I will get the OpenAPI documentation. Okay. Then here, what I'm doing, I'm trying to group the APIs by topic. So here I defined a first group. I named it stores. And I said you will look for all the controllers that will start with /stores/ and then for any controllers that starts with this pattern, they will be detected and sorted under stores. I'm disabling the cache, so also this is a feature by default. When you deploy I would say an application, you don't need that we compute the OpenAPI all the time. So by default, we compute it once. So we compute it when you request the application the first time, and then it's put in a in-memory cache. Okay, but if you want to disable this feature, so you can disable it by this parameter. So these are just some few examples. Here I'm having also the actuator endpoints. Okay. Also in actuator, you have some endpoints that are exposed. So ideally, I want also to see the actuator endpoints under the deployment. So for this, I will define groups by another way. So here I have defined groups of APIs, I would say, with configuration. I can do it also programmatically. For this, for example, I'm having group OpenAPI I'm having 2 builds, and I'm using some criteria. So I'm using the package to scan, so I'm scanning over this package, and also I'm trying to match this path. And it's same for actuator. What is important to know is that you can also add what we call customizers. So customizers, sometimes, for example, the library will generate for you a first version of the OpenAPI spec. But maybe you want to change, for example, the input parameter or the response, but you don't want to change it in your code. So for this, you can have different type of customizers. It can be the OpenAPI object, but it can be the operation object, the parameter object. So we have different types of customizers that you can use as well. So this is just to illustrate. I will just run this first example so we can see how it works. So now it started. So I can see that the application started and or under port 8081. Okay. So here, first point is that we have 3 groups. Okay, we have these 3 groups that has been identified. One that comes from the properties, the 2 others that comes from the configuration beans. So I'm having these groups. What is also interesting is that I'm having the actuator endpoint. For example, if I want to test, I don't know, one of the for example, we have info. So I'm having nothing. Let's try the health. Okay. So here I'm having status up. First one, it was empty response, but it gives you just an idea that we can also auto-discover this endpoint. Sometimes the actuator endpoints can create problems from security point of view. So if you want them to be exposed over the actuator port, it's also possible to have the Swagger UI also exposed under a different port than the one that is related to your application. So here I'm having this user application. We can see that, for example, if I want to create a user, here I'm having this request body that was pre-filled. And I'm having different type of responses. I'm having 200 and I'm having 200 and 400. So here I try, for example, to create user. I can see that I'm having a response. And if I try to see or to access the user, it's same. Normally we should get this user that has been pre-filled by the OpenAPI specification. If I delete it, so same, we'll see that it has been deleted. And if I try to access it again, we'll see that now it's 404, and it's exactly the same response that was expected. So basically, in a web MVC application, there is not too much change to do to generate the OpenAPI spec. Of course, you can add the annotations. So here I'm in the API side. For example, I'm having my, for example, if I take the user controller, here I have added, I would say, some OpenAPI annotations, just, I would say, to document better my APIs. In the next demos, I will show also how we can externalize this documentation outside of the code, which is also something that can be interesting at large scale. So this is for web MVC, same logic for webflux. So now if that we understand the principles, we just need to add the same dependency that we have seen in the slides. So with Spring Boot starter, we need to add the springdoc-openapi dependency, which is this one. And in this simple application, so it's a different application that, for example, here it handles tweets. Okay, it handles different different tweets. So I can just run the application. So here there is no API documentation that were already there. So it was basic spring-webflux application, and we run it. Just 1 second. I will have also to stop the previous one. Okay, and I will have also to see here we are using port 8080. Okay, so here as we can see, we have our example. We have our object tweet DTO that is used in the API. For example, here request body, and same we can do tests of the API. Now, if I want to go further, so if I want to go further in terms of configuration, as I said, ideally from coding point of view, it's better not to mix the Swagger annotations with your controllers. We try to avoid it the maximum. So for this, I will show two interesting features. First one is that you can add the documentation in the Spring application YAML properties. So basically, under SpringDoc, this feature has been demanded lately by many people. The idea is that, for example, I can take here, I'm having in this application, I'm having a controller, okay, with, for example, that is returning books. Maybe it's also using some books in parameters, and I want to describe it, okay. I want to have, I would say, technical technical documentation of this object. So if I don't want to impact the code, so I can define this block, and also by default, for example here, I'm having also this object that is OpenAPI that helps us define the I would say the OpenAPI object. So for example, if I go here, normally the OpenAPI definition corresponds, this book API corresponds to this part of the OpenAPI object. Ideally, for example, I want to get rid of some Swagger code in my application. So here I can remove this one. Okay. Then I can switch to properties. And here I want to create the same OpenAPI definition, but in addition, I'm trying to define the book schema. Okay. So result in the top is the same. If I go to the book here, we have, as you can see, description for the book, description for ID, and this comes from this, I would say, application YAML definition. Now we can go further, because I would say the developer is by default lazy. He wants something that works out of the box. And what I want is not to have to write this painful documentation. I want, for example, to rely on my Javadoc. My Javadoc, this can describe the book object. Okay? So what I can do then is I will remove this part, but I need to write Javadoc. So I will do something, but it's just for the demo. I will generate Javadoc. Okay. But I have to generate it for everything, for all the elements. So now what I did, I just generated the Javadoc. Okay. I will do the same as we are doing. I can go fast and then do it also for all the methods. Sorry, because I don't see. So I have generated Javadoc for all the methods. Now it will not work just like this, because the idea is that we need to introspect also the Javadoc documentation, and for this we will use or rely on a library, open source library, so that is called TerAPI. So, and this library, so if you add this library in your class path, so it will scan and it will provide SpringDoc the ability to generate the documentation from your Javadoc. And you need also to add it in the compiler plugin. Okay, so there are two places where you need to define their API library. So here we will test. So the idea is to have some documentation that is clean. As you can see, so now I'm having the method description. As you can see, 5 by ID book. Before we didn't have it, but it came somewhere from the Javadoc. Okay, so same as you can see, we have the ID, the book, but this comes from the Javadoc description, and same for the object. In addition, if you remember, in Spring in Spring Boot 3, we have also the problem details. Okay, so problem details has been detected automatically. I didn't have to code anything. The only, of course, I had to declare that we will need a REST controller advice. So I declared my controller advice. I defined here my problem detail, and automatically it has been also generated for the responses. Okay, so here we can see that these requests 400, 404, they return problem detail structure. So this was just to introduce the Spring Web MVC, spring-webflux. Now, for people that want to migrate from the V1 version, so here I have tried to describe the path, the migration path. So basically, as I said, you will need less libraries. So if before, for example, you were declaring springdoc-openapi Javadoc, springdoc-openapi Kotlin, all these are replaced by the common. Okay. So basically, in an application, as I said, you either need to declare the API part of SpringDoc or the UI part, only this. If you declare the API or the UI, you will automatically ship the common, as we have seen in the global overview. And there is a lot of features. Of course, I will try to go to the most important for these examples. But we support Java, Kotlin, and Groovy. We have also the GSR 303 bean validation that is, I would say, supported. Actuator, as we have seen, for the observability. You have problem details, also same as, so we supported before global exception handling, but now with problem details, it's a particular use case that needed also to be enhanced. We have also native support for Spring security. And also the group. So in the same application, if you want to expose multiple group of APIs, it's an option that is possible. Some people, I have seen also there is a question about the support of Spring Cloud Gateway and the exposition of microservices. I will do a demo so we can see how we can expose all the APIs in a front-end gateway, like Spring Cloud Gateway. Also, we have seen that we can generate Javadoc from the documentation. There is also the CI/CD integration. I can show it quickly. And as I said, there is multiple properties and customizers. So just here, before I move to this part, for the CI/CD, sometimes you want to get the OpenAPI documentation only in your CI/CD pipelines. You don't want it to be exposed. Okay. So here in the test phase of your application, you can use for example, you can use Maven to generate it. I will just look for an example. So here in this example, so this example is with Webflux. So to generate it in the test phase, I have added this plugin, springdoc-openapi Maven plugin. We have also the Gradle plugin that is available. And I said I want to generate it in the YAML format. Okay. And of course, I rely behind the scenes on Spring Boot plugin to start and stop the application context during the test phase. So here, if I run, I just simulate the plugin, how it works. So normally we said it should be run in the verify or during the integration tests. So this operation takes a little bit more time because on my side I generate also signed artifacts. So I'm running everything, but yeah, it should not take too much time. Okay, so here we can see that the application is starting. So here we started the application context, like as we are doing in unit test. And here I'm having connection refused, because certainly I had a server that was running. So let's run it again. Okay. Now that I have stopped this server, okay. Again, it will. So you can see it generates the Javadoc. It does a lot of things more, but I want to go just to phase integration test. Here it runs the application context. GPG sign in. Too small. Okay. Let me check. So here, anyway, here it stopped. It stopped in the, as you can see, it has stopped in the sign-in part. So but I have seen that it has generated the OpenAPI, as we can see here. It has generated the OpenAPI. So I see the init duration, and the call has been done. So if I open here, if I check, I can see that I have generated the OpenAPI that I was expecting, and it's in YAML format. And if I go just to validate it, if I go to the Swagger UI, here I have a valid OpenAPI format that is related to the Twitter API. So it's the same API. Even here, this task, it failed. I don't want to investigate a lot about the GPG signature, but we see that in the phase that is related to springdoc, it passed successfully. So this is for the I wanted to highlight this part that is related to CI/CD integration. Now I will move to the some other features that we have related to Spring Cloud Function, data REST, HATEOAS, and Spring authorization-server. So for this, I will not spend too much time to explain the principle, because basically what you need is only to add the dependency in these projects. Okay, so for example, I will take an application that is relying, let's say, for example, here I'm having Spring Cloud Function. Okay, let me take, for example, the web MVC one, Spring Cloud Function. So I'm having a simple application with annotations and with some definitions. I have this one. Just want to share the right example. Okay, I will use this one, and here I'm having different functions. So it's only Spring Cloud functions that are defined. So by default in this project, what needs to be added in addition to the Spring Cloud starter function is that you need to add the starter of Webflux UI. So automatically, when you add it to a Spring Cloud function, we will auto-discover different functions that are exposed in the REST. So I will check the port, which is 8080. And here we can see that I'm having different endpoints. I can do the same for example, for Spring HATEOAS. Just we can see the principle. So same, I'm having an application that use Spring Boot Starter HATEOAS, and to expose the endpoints, I have added the springdoc-openapi starter MVC. Only this. Of course, we have native support also for some Spring, I would say Spring HATEOAS annotations. So here you have the definition of your controller that is exposed, and we say just it relies on this repository. So it's a simple employee object that is used. So it's simple application that is doing CRUD operations. So here, if I try to access, same. This time I'm exposing it on 8085 port, but you can see that we are having this endpoints that has been automatically discovered, and here I'm having this definition in hypermedia format. So for example, if I try to get the employees, you can see that I can discover the different employees. Interesting to know that we have also the Spring Authorization Server support. So for Spring Authorization Server, so it's the new version that supports OAuth and OADC of the Spring implementation. So here I'm having an application that will be acting as a resource server, and it will be secured by the Spring OAuth authorization server. So I will choose. I'm having in the examples MVC and webflux. Here, just for the demo, I will use WebMVC. Okay, but it works for both. So I have deployed the authorization server. What is interesting to know is that in the authorization server, in the Spring authorization server, if you declare the springdoc-openapi, we will discover the REST endpoints of this server. So the authorization server starts on port 8083. Okay, so if I try to have access here, it's secured. But if I try to use the Swagger UI, I see that I'm having the different OAuth endpoints. Okay, for example, if I try, they give me the OpenID configuration. So here I'm having the response. Now, if I go to the business application, so I'm having here the business application, which is based on Spring MVC, same. I have also declared in the resource server, I have declared I would say the springdoc-openapi implementation. What is important to note is the Spring security configuration. So here I'm having the Spring security configuration to exclude the Swagger UI because I want to use it for tests. But for the other endpoints, they are secured with the appropriate scopes. So here is same. So if I stop, I didn't have to stop, I have to run it. So if I run the resource server and the authorization server, okay. Now, if I try to access the application, so here, if I do authorize, automatically these parameters are detected by SpringDoc in the YAML configuration. Here, I have to authenticate, so I will use Josh test.com 1, 2, 3. So this configuration is done on the Spring Security Authorization Server side, and once this is authorized, automatically I will have access to different APIs. So for example, here I'm able to request the different endpoints. So this is just to show the power of springdoc-openapi, that we are supporting also the new features that are continuously being added in the Spring Boot ecosystem. Also, we can benefit from the GraalVM with instant startup and all the performance improvements. So as you know, you will have low, I would say, resource usage. You reduce your attack surface, and also the advantages is that you will have compact or native packaging that is available. So when you package your application as native, automatically you can also benefit from a performance point of view of the springdoc-openapi. So for example, if I go here and I try to access I have an example that is already generated. I just want to show this. So if I take an application that is not native, so 8080, so the application starts in 1 second, or in almost 1 second, and the duration is 192. in the same time, just for the demo, because we don't have a lot of time, I have already generated the binary. So here, if I show, so I have just generated before the examples the binary, I will stop the other instance, and if we try to access it, you can see that in terms of performance, we are in native version of the image. If I try to access the OpenAPI spec, also you will see that the performance is improved. Okay, so there are a huge improvement because behind the scene, also we removed the usage of WebJar locator, which heavily scans the class path. So this is just to give an idea. Also, as I said, we support microservices. For the question, there is an example that is available. After the session, I can share it with people, and you can see also how we can integrate with Spring config and the Spring Cloud Gateway. So basically, you just need to declare the dependencies, as we said, in the different components. And there is a logic to scan for the different backend services. The example is available in open source, so I have shared with you the source code so you can download it. Just to finish, so in addition, I would say, to the contributions to springdoc-openapi, I just wanted to share with you also another initiative that I have taken lately. So, as I'm involved heavily in the security landscape, I try also to contribute in the Spring ecosystem. So there will be a book. It's already in pre-order, but it's coming early July. I hope so, and it will deep dive into the new features that has been added in Spring Security 6. Okay, and with this, we reach the end of this session. So I hope it was interesting for you. And if there is any questions or feedbacks, please feel free so we can discuss it just after. Thank you so much.